Today I'm using napkins in my collage. Hi, I'm Christine, the artist behind Arlissa Designs, and I'm happy you're here. Welcome. This page was already started in my collage book, and I thought it was a great one to add these images that I created. Recently I went to Ollie's and I found these great napkins with that gold holographic streak that runs through it, and I was wondering if the hologram effect would hold up under Mod Podge or matte gel medium. AI seems to be everywhere these days, so I created some images that I could add to the background and blend in, and then try to connect them all with the gold from the napkins. If you haven't used napkins before in a collage, they're great. They work a lot like tissue paper. So when you glue them to the page, they seem to disappear and allow the design to kind of stand on its own. So as I said before, this page was already created. You can see some barcode, not the one that I just added, but the one on the top of the second page on the right. I just opened up the page as I was working on another project and took a bunch of my scraps and went ahead and glued them on empty pages in my journal. This is a great tip for a couple of reasons. First, you don't have a bunch of scraps all over the place while you're working. They have a place to go. And another reason why is because sometimes when you decide what you're doing on the page, it affects how you put the background down. This way you're doing it ahead of time and you're finding things that fit with the background after it's created, if that makes sense. You get some really cool backgrounds that otherwise you might not have thought of. Some great effects as you put the scraps down on the page. And then most of the time I just take a little paint and either brush or stamp with a sponge over it to push everything back into the background and just allow some of my favorite parts to come through. This one was great because it was mostly black and whites and grays with a little bit of olive, and which I think would go really well with this gold that I'm going to put in later. I really love this process of creating just backgrounds without even considering what's going to go over on top of them later, because when I'm working on ATCs or whatever project I'm working on with paper, I always have a pile of little torn scrap pieces and parts of the background of whatever I've cut out that I hate to throw away, because there's some really cool pieces that don't get into the project. So this way you can use all of those up. And again, you won't have them buried in a scrap box with tons of other different designs. So you kind of get a cohesive background because you're using pieces from one page or set of pages that you're already working on. And they're out of the way. They're already placed on a page all together, and it makes creating the next page so much easier because it's halfway there and you don't have to wait for it to dry. I'm so impatient when I'm working on something and I have a wet background page and I have to wait for the layers to dry. This way it's all dried and ready for the main images. I think it's important to let each layer dry because, at least in my case, I'm using a composition book, and when you get those pages wet, they can be very wrinkly. And when I let that first layer dry, it kind of flattens out a little bit and makes it easier to work on. And the pieces that I'm gluing down don't rip as easily. At least that's my experience. So here I'm taking some of the things that I've glued down and just sponge painting over them to kind of push them back in the background a little bit because I don't want that to be my main focus. I have covered up things too much sometimes where you can't see it anymore, but that's okay because then you just find something to glue over it and add something new. But I'm pretty happy with the way this background came out. This feels a little bit like it's leaning towards steampunk, so the next thing I want to do with this is add a layer of stenciling. So I got out my stencils with gears and cogs and stuff and started just adding a little bit of it to sections of the page. Now, in this case, it was very dark, so I will go back over it a little bit to kind of soften that up a little bit. I like to use my sponge. You can use blending brushes or sprays, but in this case, I just had my sponges out already. But it came out a little wet and dark, so I'm just taking a napkin to take a little bit of the paint off. And here you see I'm using a blending brush. So depending on how sharp you want those images from the stencil will determine which method you use. I love using spray paints with stencils, but usually I'll collect a few projects and take it outside. I hate the smell in my art room, and there's a few that don't have high odor, but I still take them outside. As you can see, I switched from the black paint with the stencils to this ink pad, and I have no idea where I got this. I think it was a clearance item at Hobby Lobby. I'll check, and if it's an Amazon find, I'll add the affiliate link in the description. Which, by the way, if you haven't watched any of my other videos, I always link the items that I'm using from Amazon in the description so that you can find them easily yourself. They're affiliate links, so I might make a commission off of some of the items that you purchase, but it doesn't cost anything for you and it helps me, so thank you. As long as we're there, I feel like it's a good time for me to say, if you haven't liked this video yet and you're still here, please go down and hit the like button. It really helps me grow, and I'm working really hard to create this community. I'm having a great time doing it, but I'd love to have people who are involved that ask questions or make suggestions or even tell me that I'm doing something wrong. It doesn't matter. Leave a comment if you love what you're seeing and you want to help me and keep me motivated. I would really appreciate that. And thank you to the ones who already have. So I'm still building on this layer, and sometimes I just can't stop with the stencils. But a good way to kind of back it up if you use too much is just to take that paint and go over it and let some parts of the stencil shine through and go back and cover up what's too much, which I do all the time. That's what I love about collage is that you can just layer and cover it up and layer and cover it up. Some of my pages in my art journals are quite thick, sort of like a baby's board book, but they hold up really well. And I just think in a collage, the more layers, the better it always ends up turning out. And personally, I think that is even more true when you're working on canvas. So now I'm going to start putting on the next layer. I added the girl here, and I just want to go around her and blend her into the page. And I went back and added over that gold a little bit of the writing that was in the stencil because I really like it. Now I'm just trying to soften up parts of it. And now that she's in there, I figured it's a good time to break out those napkins. And here's the part that was requested by my friend Stacy, who I've mentioned a few times on this channel. Love her so much. I met her on TikTok, and she's really motivated me to create a lot lately. And she was asking me how I use the napkins. So, because I was already starting on this collage, I didn't really film it to show exactly how to use napkins. So, I'll do that in the next video or an upcoming video soon. But you just separate the layers of the napkin and around the design that you want. And you can do that by taking a wet paintbrush and just drawing around your image as if it were a pencil, and then the napkin will tear easily. And I feel like torn edges around the image kind of blends it into the page a lot better. And that part almost disappears after it's glued on, almost exactly like tissue paper. You see I'm just adding either Mod Podge or matte gel medium wherever I'm going to place the napkin. And you need it to be somewhat wet, not too much because you can't smooth the napkin out like you would a piece of paper. So with paper, I would add a lot of Mod Podge and then I would smooth it out with a card or my finger and kind of push the glue out from underneath it. Here, you don't want to do that. You want it completely wet, but you don't want excessive amounts of glue. And I've discovered that before I go over the top of it and seal it, I just kind of lightly tap it down with my fingers and smooth it out very gently. And I will usually allow that to dry a little bit because once it's dried underneath, it's not going to tear when you go over it with the glue. Here, I just went over the edges of the napkin with the brush and made sure that they were down and blended into the page. I love this napkin. It has a little bit of gray around it, which matched perfectly with this page. And I did get a little bit of glue on the gold hologram, but once it dried, you couldn't see it, and that hologram effect is still there. I'm going to try and show you and see if the light picks up the gold. It's so pretty. You have to see this in person. You need to go out and find some hologram napkins and try this. I mean, I'm just obsessed with how it came out on this page. I'm so glad that I have an entire pack of these napkins, although it's only on 1/4. I love it when you open up a napkin and the image is on the entire napkin. This is only 1/4, but this was one napkin, so it did go a long way. You can see here I'm moving this napkin around and pulling it up and replacing it. So it's quite sturdy if you're gentle with it. And with this one, I went ahead and added a little bit more of the area of the napkin around with the gray because I just love it, created that kind of shadow effect. I don't really know how to explain it, but you could see here it just adds to that section of the page and covers up a little bit of the stenciling while also letting it show through. And I know it's hard to see here, but when you see it in person, you can still see some of that stencil show through. And here's another instance where I was quite rough with the napkin, but it held up very well. Anywhere it gets wet, it's going to tear easily. This is the last part of the napkin that I'll put down here, and I really love the way it came out. I didn't think there was going to be that much to work with, but once I tore each part of the lines out of the napkin and turned them and flipped them in different ways, I was able to get these nice long lines that connected everything together. So I'm really happy with the way this turned out. And I'm so happy again. I'm so happy I have the rest of the napkin pack to work with on other collages. As I finish this, I'll take a minute to let you know that I added 4 pages of images that I created on my link tree. And I'd love some feedback on this. I was thinking about creating image packs to make available, maybe once a week, maybe every other week, once a month, that you can print out and create your own collages with them. I think it's really cool to see images that I've used before and find someone else's collage with those same images in them. As you know, I love collage soup, and I think it's so fun when you see people creating different things from the same images. I also think that that would help build our community. And as people create and you share, it helps build your profiles and mine. So let me know what you think. So everything that I wanted to glue so far, as I know at this point, is down on the page and everything's dried. And I need to blend these ladies into the page a little bit better. So because there's so many grays and charcoals in these images already, I decided to go on with my pencil and just extend this lady's head a bit and create kind of a dark shadow that she's peeking out of. This is very meditative because I'm just going in and extending a little bit at a time around the areas that I really like that I want to show, but it also gives you the opportunity to kind of go back in and cover up some parts that you don't like as much. And then I just go in with my hand, with my finger, and blend it in and extend her hair a little bit. You could create a whole different hairstyle this way. Because there's already some charcoal grays and there's not a lot of harsh black in this background, I chose to go with just a soft pencil to blend her into the page. But you could go in with Prismacolor watercolor pencils and create a halo around her in any color. And what I love about the Prismacolor pencils is that you can come in with a wet brush and blend it and create a watercolor effect. This blended so well just by moving it around with my finger that I stayed with the pencil on this collage. But now I want to go do one in my signature blue colors because I think that would be fun. I'm just extending this lady's head so it doesn't look like she's just sitting there floating. And you just work on them a little bit at a time until you are happy with the result. And I'm pretty happy with the way this is going, but I do want to kind of set them back a little bit further, but I don't want to add too much of, of a dark black. So if you've never tried Derwent Intense XL blocks, which I'll show you here in a minute, you should go down to the description and grab some on Amazon because these things are amazing. I took out the black block and went over the areas closest to her to darken it up a little bit and kind of make her seem like she was coming from further in the background than she was and add dimension to the page. And I love the effect. So I'll just read the front of the package. It says water soluble, vibrant colors that dry permanently for exceptional layering. Draw, paint, cut, or grate in XL format for broad coverage. So this is kind of like the watercolor that I was explaining before with the Prismacolors. You can go in and use these pencils and then use water to move it around, or you can just blend it the way I'm blending it here. And as you can see, I didn't add very much, but a little goes a very long way. So I just wanted to connect these two faces together so that the spread looks like one piece instead of two pieces side by side. And also tone down some of these bright creamy colors, which I love and I want to leave a little bit, but I want to create and carry those shadows through the two pages. And as you can see here, I thought that the edge of where I tore that image looked really cool. So I went in and kind of brought that out so that you can see it. Most of the time I'm trying to cover up the torn edges, but this just seemed really cool there on the corner. So you can go in and just lightly hit those pieces around the edge and it really created a cool effect. So that's pretty much it for this layout. I really love the way it came out. It's one of my favorite ones that I've done recently. And I'm thinking about making this one of the packs that I share on my Linktree for you to download and create. Let me know in the comments if you would like to try your hand at creating something of your own from these images. You'll have to go out and find your own napkins though. Or you can use gold paint. There's so many different ways. I just love when they're in napkins because sometimes when I try and create that effect in paint, it doesn't work out well. So here's another great tip. If you're creating in a book like this and you've used Mod Podge or matte gel medium or gloss, whatever it is that you use, when you're done with the page, but it needs to be completely done, you can't really go back and do anything to it after. I take either some liquid wax or even a birthday candle if that's all you have, and go over the page, and then you take a soft cloth and just rub it in, and then that way when you close your books, your pages won't stick. You definitely want to make sure that everything's completely dry before you do that. I would wait a few days at least after you complete a collage to wax the pages, and then nothing will stick. So if you go back and try and add something, you're out of luck because it's not going to stick. And if it does, it won't stay. So here it is. You can see some of the detail in here, and you can see that the gold matted down a little bit, but it still is there. And I love it. It's so pretty. I love this spread. It's very futuristic in a vintage kind of way. If you enjoyed this and you're still here, please like and subscribe and share this video with someone who may also enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.